Welcome to When Love Hurts, a podcast that explores the abuse of women by men through women's stories and expert insight.
We break down what abuse really is beyond physical violence and look at its deep emotional, psychological, and societal impact.
This podcast is designed for everyone, survivors, support persons, and professionals.
Let's begin.
Welcome back. Thank you for joining us for episode 2. This episode is going to explore the cycle of abuse, both from the perspective of the abusive men's behaviour and how women experience the cycle. First of all, let's pause and have our land acknowledgement.
We acknowledge that we are on the unceded territory of the WSÁNEĆ people on the far west coast of Turtle Island, also known as Canada.
I'm Jo Neal.
And I'm Alison Epp.
We're your hosts, I should say.
Yeah.
And then we have our experts,
Karen McCandless-Davis.
And Jill Corey.
I thought we might start today. We're going to talk about the cycle of abuse. And I mentioned in episode 1, when I was first introduced to the cycle of abuse, and I was curious when the three of you were first encountered the cycle of abuse. So maybe starting with you, Jill, when did you first come across this?
I came across it as an academic. Lenore Walker had developed the cycle of abuse back in, I believe, 1979.
Yeah.
And so I was in graduate school in the early 80s. And again, there wasn't a lot of feminist material from a scholarly perspective around violence against women. And so it was seen as a very major contribution to understanding women's experiences of abuse. But the thing that never fit for me in the way that she used it, she claimed that women stayed because they learned helplessness. And that didn't ever fit well for me. So what Karen and I have kind of drawn as a conclusion from her work is that she describes very well what women describe as the pattern. Her own analysis was too informed by the dominant discourse. She was a psychologist who kind of, again, came from a frame of dysfunction and deficits and held women responsible for the problem. So the cycle is very helpful right from the outset, but you will learn that we've brought our own analysis based on women's experiences to understanding the cycle.
And how about you, Alison? When did you first encounter the cycle?
You introduced it to me. I hadn't come across the cycle until you first introduced it to me and labeled what I was experiencing as abuse. And the cycle really hit home for me and actually helped me to see the reality of what I was going through.
And that's amazing because you'd actually received quite a bit of counseling already, right? And so nobody had given you what we would all say is like a key starting point tool that women need. You weren't getting it as you were seeking help. Yeah,
Interesting.
Sad and interesting.
Yeah.
How about for you, Jo?
Yeah, it was you. It was through the book and our sessions together, and then the support group. Going through it in weeks 1 and 2 of the support group, and it really made sense of what I was experiencing. There was a lot of honeymooning for me. We'll get into that when we get into when we talk about it. But one stage is honeymooning, and I would experience a lot of that. So for me, my relationship felt pretty good a lot of the time, until it didn't.
Right.
And that pattern was in existence from the beginning.
Right.
So learning about the cycle, it made sense of what I had been experiencing. It did feel like a repetitive pattern that just kept happening over and over and over again. Yeah, so now we've talked about how we all came to be introduced to the cycle. Karen, can you explain more about it? What is this cycle?
Yeah, just describe it. Maybe listeners have seen it somewhere, maybe you haven't, but just so we're all kind of on the same page of what we're talking about when we talk about the cycle of abuse. So it's the behavior that men who are abusive demonstrate in the relationship. And it starts with honeymoon that Jo was just referencing. That's the positive behavior that she sees in the beginning. It's what draws her in. It's what she says yes to, right? He's a great conversationalist. He's very helpful. He's good with children. They're doing fun things together, all those kind of things. The only thing really that makes it different from what would end up to be a respectful relationship is he doesn't stay there. He moves around this cycle. The next phase of the cycle is tension building. So he's doing things to create tension in the household, in her body. She'll feel that tension building. It might be he's moody, he's withdrawn, he's very judgmental, critical, controlling what she's doing, how she's doing it. And then there's this escalation up to what we call the explosion, which may be big and loud. It may be yelling, throwing things, name calling. It also might be things like the silent treatment or taking off and she doesn't know where he is. It's kind of the most devastating behavior for the woman in many ways. And then he typically moves back to the honeymoon. So he's cycling around these 3 different types of behavior. Really important to say that all 3 types are part of the pattern of abuse. You know, often people think that abuse is maybe just the explosion, right? But the honeymoon is actually part of the pattern of abuse too. It's entrapping, it pulls her in, it's grooming. And it's part of why the relationship continues, right? If when he first met her, he exploded on the first date. I mean, first of all, there probably wouldn't be a second date.
Yeah, exactly.
But if there was, like if all there was explosion, the relationship wouldn't last. It's that the honeymoon pulls her in. And, you know, we use the word honeymoon because it is helpful in many ways, but there's some other words that are also helpful, like manipulative kindness. Some women really connect with that. His behavior looks kind, but it absolutely has this manipulative edge to it. And one of the things we often ask is to a woman, like, could you say no to what's being offered in the honeymoon? And what do you think a woman would say if she paused and she thought, he wants to go out on a date after exploding all over me last night, or he's brought home a gift after the explosion. What do you think a woman would say as to whether she can say no to that honeymoon?
I had one woman that sticks in my mind is she said, he bought me these beautiful pieces of jewelry. And the one time that I was like, I don't want this, then another explosion happened immediately.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I rejected the gift.
Yeah. And in respectful, truly respectful relationships, romantic or otherwise, if someone is offering you a kindness, you can decline it, right? And you're not going to get the explosion.
Yeah.
But women tell us time and time again, and to be clear, we're not suggesting that women do say no to the honeymoon because that's probably dangerous. But for them to ask themselves, could I say no to this, you know, what I'm now starting to identify as honeymoon? You know, just as an example, often after the explosion, he wants to have sex.
Yeah.
I haven't met a woman yet who's like, oh yeah, I want to have sex after you've called me every horrible name in the book, right?
Yeah.
But she also knows if I don't go along with that, he's going to go back to explosion or he's going to move on to tension.
And, you know, a lot of this gets framed as normal relationship behavior. So it's conflict. And then when you think about the sex, it's like this idea of makeup sex, right? And again, women don't have room there to say, actually, it's really risky for me and I'm really afraid and I'm more afraid to say no. So it's like the dominant discourse just calls it makeup sex. But for a woman, it's very coerced and non-consensual. I think that's where we hear women's story is not through this lens of, oh, that's normal in relationships. It's like, it may be common in abusive relationships, but it's not okay.
So important to remember that everybody else is going to just see the honeymoon part of him. This is another thing that people don't get who haven't lived it, is that he's going to honeymoon friends, family, social workers, lawyers, judges, teachers, everyone. Counselors. Absolutely. And
the children.
That's what other people see. And as you were saying, Joe, like part of what sounds like to me, part of what was confusing to you was that there was so much honeymoon, right? And so it is part of what's confusing when someone can be so kind to you one day and then treat you like you're the scum of the earth the next day. That's very, very confusing.
Like I think about some of the news reports where he's murdered his partner and maybe the children, and then they interview neighbors and the neighbors all have a story of he was such a nice guy or was really helpful around the neighborhood. Imagine how that lands for the women who are hearing that because they were honeymooned and they saw only the best of him. But in our culture, how do we not see the importance or the significance that he murdered somebody, right? And that we allow that dominant discourse of he was such a nice guy to prevail over the devastation that he's created.
It reminds me of how that honeymoon phase really serves to keep her trapped. If we even go back to that dominant discourse that we talked about in the first episode, and how we were asking, what's wrong with me? Why is she choosing these men? But in actuality, he is choosing her. Abusers often choose women who are agreeable, conscientious, loyal to a fault, maybe super empathetic, optimistic, caring, compassionate women. And those are such incredible strengths that she has.
Yeah, right.
And he intentionally chose that.
Yeah.
She didn't. So there's this switch we need to see of like, she has all these incredible strengths and she's seeing the honeymoon and the world is seeing the honeymoon. Yet you close the door and the carpenter ants are eating away at the foundation. And no one else is seeing it.
Tell us a bit more about the carpenter ants. Why is that image helpful for you?
I think the thing that is most helpful is it shows how hidden it is. I mean, I've never had carpenter ants eat the foundation of my house, but when they do, they can slowly eat away at it and slowly pick away at the foundation until all of a sudden the house collapses completely. And so you don't see the eating away at a woman's self-esteem, at who she is, and everything about her is getting eaten away at. And then the world doesn't see that. And then they see the murder. And then they see the woman completely hysterical when the police have been called. And all they see is the hysterical piece. They're not seeing how she was being degraded and like everything about her was being eaten away already.
And one of the ironies of the honeymoon that you're pointing to is that all of those things that are so like beautiful about her, he says he loves, right? That he values and holds special. And that's that manipulation that we're talking about in the cycle, that he's saying what he needs to trap her, to bring her into the relationship.
Yeah. And as we think about sort of how, just picturing the whole cycle and how it plays out, as we've said, what she sees in the beginning is honeymoon. And likely that's the predominant thing she's going to see until probably there's a level of commitment that makes it no longer easy to leave the relationship. You know, that might be moving in together. It might be buying a business together. It might be she's pregnant. Might be they got married. Might be engagement. Like there's various things that make it no longer easy to walk away from. Or, you know, some women just say like, I told all my friends he's such a great guy and they all really like him, right? And now she's seeing the tension and explosion more. So he's quite intentional about which of these three tactics he uses at each stage. And he uses a lot of honeymoon in the beginning. You know, sometimes women say to us, I feel like I'm not getting any honeymoon at all. Like, I feel like he's just, you know, moving back and forth between tension and explosion. And if that's happening, it's very likely that she's really trapped because he doesn't have to honeymoon her anymore. You know, again, that might be like maybe there's two small children. She's working in the home. She's not working outside of the home. Maybe he moved her away from family. And so she's living far away. She doesn't have supports. So the honeymoon can get very, very small when she's really trapped. And then if something happens that she has a little bit more choice, like maybe her sister says, you could come and stay with us, or maybe she decides to go to the women's shelter, then very likely he's going to ramp up more honeymoon, right? So it really helps us to see how he's choosing different behaviors at different times.
Yeah.
It's really important when we talk about him choosing that we talk about what the woman experiences, which is that she's just being pushed along. Like she's not in control of any of this, that she's just responding to what he's using. And like more and more, she's just thinking about, how do I stay out of the way? How do I stay small? How do I stay, you know, women don't always use the language of safe, but how do I protect myself and the kids? And it really helps, I think, to see that these choices that he's making are he's fully in control of them. He knows exactly when to use them, and that she's just responding. The thing we really want listeners to understand is that it's not predictable.
Yeah.
Right? Even though it's a pattern, it is not predictable.
Yeah.
So he might stay in that honeymoon for a long, long time, and that might be really agonizing. It's like, where is this going? Or women just start to let down their guard, for example. All of them can be really dangerous, but they're not predictable because she can't say, well, every 2 weeks or once this happens, right?
Yeah.
It's so important to say, because if we don't get that, we might think that the woman should be able to predict, and she really can't.
Yeah.
Like, part of abuse is it's unpredictable, right? So often women say, I could have never imagined he would have done X, right? And as you said, the honeymoon could last 6 months, right?
Yeah.
If she's stepped away from the relationship and he's really hoping to get her back, he's promising to go to counseling, he's communicating in respectful ways, he's trying to draw her back in. And, often the question for women at that time is like, is this honeymoon or is this real change, right? And women really deserve good support as they're trying to discern that, because that is a hard question. And it takes time to see if this is honeymoon or real change. And women deserve support as they're waiting to sort of see where things will go.
I think I've been asked this question a lot from people on the outside looking in, is how could we have seen the red flag? A couple comes forward and they find out that there's been abuse present, or the woman is starting to share and opens up, and they want to know, well, like, how can I have seen the signs? How could I have, what am I supposed to look for? We now see, like, with that honeymoon phase, you couldn't have. You couldn't have seen anything. There isn't a way from the outside looking in until she starts to share what's happening for you to see what is actually happening.
Not for her either. Like, the red flags, we're only making up after the fact, right? We're not, you can't look and say, that's like, well.
Exactly. And, even if there is something that might be classified as a red flag, it's hidden within all of this other amazing behavior. So of course she's going to go, that's an anomaly. That is an anomaly compared to all of this other wonderful behavior.
The good greatly outweighs the bad in the beginning, right?
It annoys me no end, actually, to when, again, it's that being focused on the woman. What should the woman have done differently? Or she should have noticed the red flags.
That's right. Yeah. He really shouldn't groom and target. Really.
Exactly.
Exactly.
And we know that even once, if she's able to get out of the relationship, we know that this cycle continues after separation. It might look a little bit different because she's not going to be in the same space as him. But any point of contact they have, it could be the finances, it's the legal proceedings, it's often the children. Our partners may realize they cannot sufficiently control their victim anymore. They're losing control with divorce proceedings, and harming the mother-child relationship becomes the strategy that's employed. And it follows the same abuse cycle pattern.
So what that kind of looks like often, again, as you said, through any point of contact. So let's say the transfer of the children, right? One day they're transferring the children, and he's honeymooning, and he's saying, I don't think we need to use these lawyers. I think we can come to an agreement, right? And another time, she's buckling the children into the car seats as quickly as she can, and he's screaming at her through the open door on the other side across the children, right? And so honeymoon tension explosion. Women also say, as he's communicating through text or email or any of those things, with a certain lens, women can see, oh, that's honeymoon. Oh, that's tension. Oh, that's explosion, right? And it leaves women really, really confused. And, Jill said in the first episode that in many ways things are harder for women now than 40 years ago when she started. And one of the things that's harder is the ways that he can constantly get at her through text, email, social media, and so on and so forth. Like long, long time ago, there was the phone, maybe an answering machine, whatever, right? But now he can bombard her throughout the day. And, in many ways, if she has her cell phone in her purse, it's like he's walking around in her purse, right? And he can get at her through these different things. We really find it adds to the confusion when women are constantly being bombarded with the different parts of the cycle, right? Because the cycle has such a confusing impact on women until they can get really clear that this is a cycle, this is a pattern, it's his pattern. As you said, Joe, he's going to continue it post-separation. He's actually going to do it with his next partner too. And that, while painful to know, is often validating for women that it really isn't me. Wow. He's doing the same thing with the next person.
That's such a validating thing. If a woman can really understand that. It's like, it's not actually personal, which is kind of a weird thing. And that brings up questions for women as well. Did he ever love me?
Right. Yeah.
That's a big one, right? So,
I think that's really important too when we talk about this cycle. It's like, this is very good news for women to be able to kind of lift some of that confusion and make sense of it. But it's also very painful to really name that this is intentional on his part. And that question that comes up, was it ever love? Or like, what was this all about? And so there's some really bad news in recognizing that maybe this is your experience.
I've had women share in group that the times we do talk about the cycle and the impact it had on, like the cycle had on her, can be the most difficult group sessions because they start to truly see that his choices were intentional and maybe he didn't truly love me. And those can be really, really painful pieces.
Because part of the dominant discourse is that he's out of control, right? Like when he's raging in the explosion, that he's out of control because he's so anxious or he's so stressed or whatever it is. But it's actually a choice. And one of the ways we kind of focus in on this in group is just to ask, if he was exploding, throwing things, swearing, whatever, and a police officer walked in or his boss walked in or anybody that he might respect walked in, would he stop? And absolutely. Absolutely.
Such a good question.
Right? He would stop. And as you said, Alison, that's really devastating, right? That he's choosing that. And just to target a little bit more how much the honeymoon is choice too, is that often when women are coming to that place of painfully deciding, maybe I do need to separate, so often he plays a really big honeymoon card, right? Like maybe she's been asking for 16 years if they could go to couples counseling. And he's like, nope, no, not for me. Don't believe in counseling. And then he gets some sense that she's really distancing and she's going to maybe step away. There's a very good chance he will be sitting down at the computer, finding a couples counselor, saying, I'm willing to do anything. I'll go to couples counseling, which is actually at that point just a honeymoon behavior, right? But part of what it says is he's paying attention and he knows what she wants, but he's withholding it until it serves him, which is so painful to realize, right? Because in loving, respectful relationships, we generously give what the other would appreciate or like to the best of our ability. We don't withhold it and use it as a tactic to try to regain control. And so often women in that context will feel like, well, now I need to give him a chance, right? Like he's finally willing to go to counseling. Right?
Well, and ultimately what they want is they want him to change. So it makes sense that they want to give it a chance, right?
It's kind of like he's weaponized hope, right?
Yes. That's such a good way of looking at it.
I want to talk a little bit about the tension phase because that's calling it tension is one of the ways that we make it look like normal relationships. People have a little bit of tension and then it gets solved and you're back, right? But what's different when you think about the tension phase? What is it really? Like it's really fear there. It's not tension. But what are some of the characteristics of the tension phase? Like for me, I think about the rules. Like things are going, well, she's not saying no. So she's doing what she thinks will kind of keep the peace and hold that cycle at bay a little bit. And so there's rules that she has to follow. And he's given her lots of rules. The problem is they keep changing, right? 1 week, it's like, I want the kids in bed at 7:00. So she's doing that. And then the next week, it's like, you're trying to keep the children away from me by getting them to bed before I get home. And so it's the very same action on her part, but the rules change. So now what does she do? I remember a woman once saying he gave her a limited amount of money to spend on groceries. And he only ate white bread, but he wanted the kids to eat healthy. So she said one day, and it was a turning point for her, I was standing in front of the bread counter, the bakery, and I was like, Do I get white or do I get brown? And so I think what we want listeners to understand is the minutia of these decisions that are so risky, right? She buys brown bread and she's an inconsiderate partner who never thinks about his needs. If she buys white bread, she's a bad mother and is careless with their health. And so these binds that those rules and the changing rules put women in is really so impactful. And when we talk about women losing their freedom, that's kind of such a small example, but massive in the everyday life of a woman.
Yeah, I think something that sticks out to me from even what you say is like the impact that might have on her. And the tension to me, I think of always is the tension in her body versus just the tension that's going on, is I think how the impact is so strong in her body.
Yeah. She'll probably not be sleeping very well. She may start having digestive issues, right? She may have what might be diagnosed as panic attacks, but like there's fear there for a reason. Like she's fearful.
Yeah, a simple choice becomes really complicated.
Exactly. And risky.
And on the outside looking in, it's like, how can you can't choose between brown and white bread?
Yeah.
Yeah. And let's think a little bit more about what it is like for the woman living with this cycle, right? So we have described the cycle a little bit. What's maybe happening for her in the honeymoon and the tension and the explosion? You know, for sure we want to name that over time, what's happening for her in the honeymoon will probably change, right? In the beginning, she feels really hopeful. This is absolutely what she wants. And probably many times around the cycle, when he comes back to honeymoon, there's just relief. It's like, whew, we're back on track.
Yeah.
This is who I chose. Here he is again.
Yeah.
And
I don't know what happened over there.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's no frame yet. So I don't know what that was, but
and he's getting some excuse for that, right?
Absolutely.
That was because he was stressed at work or her mother's around too much or whatever it is, right?
You know, Karen, just a tangential to that is that we often say that women excuse their partners, but he gives the excuses and society gives the excuses. And women take that up, but it's like she's not making these excuses up. They're widely available to excuse why he's doing what he's doing.
And she's just trying to make sense of this crazy, confusing circumstance. She's doing the best she can.
And how might women be in the honeymoon further on into the relationship, you know, like maybe multiple years in or post-separation and he's honeymooning and she's really done with the relationship. Like how might she be then, do you think?
Yeah, I think it's still super confusing, right? Because you are still working against a system that's seeing only the honeymoon.
Yes.
So it can be really confusing because you might see lawyers and other educators that are a part of the children's lives, counselors, your own family or friends. They will see the honeymoon behavior and be like, well, he's changed. He learned his lesson, right? Yet there's still the pieces of tension building that start to come out that maybe only the woman knows, right? A subtle comment in an email that maybe a lawyer won't pick up on, but you know that comment was directed at you as a threat to keep that fear there. So the honeymoon is still so confusing because his behavior, again, is changing. He's now maybe he's got a new partner. The kids love him. He's being such a great dad. He's getting me everything. He's doing all these fun things with me. Everyone's starting to see this behavior. He's working a great job. Everyone sees his great things. Yet, you know, deep down, those little threats are still coming in. So the confusion and crazy making, it doesn't stop. It's still there. It's just, it's shifted to a little bit further down the road. Another context.
Yeah, some women too, I think at a certain point realize, okay, maybe in the honeymoon, I can get something that I need to get. Like, you know, the kids need new shoes for school. Okay, he seems like he's in a pretty good mood. Maybe this is when I get the shoes or talk about getting the shoes or whatever. And sometimes women can feel bad. Like sometimes women have said, no, I feel like I'm being manipulated. But that's really just a safety strategy. You know, if you're in a safe relationship, you can get shoes for the kids anytime and not be afraid of what's going to happen, right? Yeah.
or when to ask for that vacation time.
Yeah. I think you were touching on, Allison, how powerful the honeymoon is. And it's so important for all of us to get that. I think, sometimes people who haven't actually lived this, they have this attitude of, well, I would see through the honeymoon. I would know better. And that is so not true. Everybody buys the honeymoon. It's very convincing. And, so anytime if I'm kind of working alongside a counselor who's working with men who are abusive, I want to hear them say, I know I'm going to be honeymooned by him.
Yeah.
So I'm setting up some things to help me when he honeymoons me, right? What scares me is professionals who are like, oh, I would never believe, I would never fall for the honeymoon. You have to know that you are going to fall. If you're working with men who are abusive, you are going to fall for the honeymoon. It's so powerful. I think of one woman who he came, for Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, and everything to her extended family, and she wasn't allowed to come.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so he successfully honeymooned her entire extended family. Right? So it's that powerful.
Yeah. I think it's so powerful that we are justifying sometimes outside of that. Like when we are seeing on the outside, we're like, oh, there's these little justification comments that come from other people.
Right.
That, well, he just was doing that for this reason.
Right.
Like, oh, he must be just saying that because of this comment. Like there's these little justifications that can happen that people don't realize that they're making those justifications and that they have been honeymooned.
Yeah. We don't justify the impacts for women, right? Like we don't have equal grace or truth really for women. We don't say, well, she's in an abusive relationship, so of course she's really upset, or of course she's forgetful, or of course she's late for these appointments. But for the abuser, we have all kinds of little justifications that kind of remove accountability and responsibility.
For sure.
Allison, I don't know, I'm thinking again about just the little, kind of the micro that you were talking about, like just the little things that no one else might pick up on. I remember a woman saying once, like she used to talk to her mom every day, and he thought that was so nice, and he loved the family, and he was really connected with the family. But after that initial honeymoon, whenever she talked to her mom, he would say, oh, talking to your mom again? And then he would just make a comment like, don't you think you're old enough that maybe you could cut the apron strings now? We think that explosion is in your face, but it can be so manipulative and so threatening at the same time. And so how does a woman who hears that, because in a way she's thinking, well, maybe he's right.
Yes, I was going to say that. There's possibly a grain of truth in it. Does she maybe need to, she's going to be, it's so convincing. She's going to wonder,
And can you see how quick then that he gets to narrate the story, right? Like just in that little way, he's got control of the story because she's now thinking about it. Because that's what thoughtful people do, is like, are you saying something that I should pay attention to?
Really highlights her strength.
Yes.
Right? To me, I just see her incredible ability to like take that feedback and actually take it to heart and think, maybe there is something I could work on there.
Yeah. And so right from the beginning, I think that's what the cycle sets up is, especially around the rules, is that there's something for her to work on. And the message is over and over again. If you didn't do that, I wouldn't do this, right? And society joins in on that. If she hadn't done that, certainly he wouldn't have behaved that way, but it's kind of reasonable based on what she did. And so, navigating that level of blame, right?
Yeah. And the abuse, like you said, it's so intentional, it's so targeted, it's so conscious on his part. And so there is a difference in the language, and I think it's not wrong to necessarily use that as a way to understand what's going on, but we do want to accurately label what is going on.
And I think what women often latch onto first with that is that it describes how profoundly self-centered he is. And he is profoundly self-centered. And we're going to talk about the belief system of abusive men, which is profoundly self-centered. But all of them operate this way, right? And they're not all narcissistic. And as you pointed out, that's actually a mental health diagnosis.
What about coercive control? Because this is a language that's actually being put into a lot of laws, and there's a lot of advocacy being done on it. So what about that language?
Yeah. That's a good
What
question.
what do you, there's some things I know, Joe, that you like about that language, and that maybe helped you make some sense of what was going on for you.
Yeah, yeah, it did. I remember actually first coming across the language. It was actually my dad who highlighted it for me, because in the UK, where I'm from, they passed a law in 2015, and he'd been reading up about things, and he said, "I think this sounds like what you've been going through." And I remember reading it and thinking, "Oh my goodness, yes, that's it." Because what I experienced was not the more obvious abusive tactics. What I experienced really was very coercive, very subtle.
and covert and
Yeah, exactly. Very covert. And like I said earlier, massive periods of honeymooning. You know, I wasn't called names. There was no physical assault. Even the financial pieces were kind of not as obvious. So yeah, for me, it did. I found it helpful, but it's not helpful in that it doesn't name that it's being done by men to women. So that piece is not helpful. And Jill, you've got some thoughts around what you're finding not helpful about it.
Yeah, I think, again, what women are relating to, same as the narcissism, that there's aspects of that behavior that they really relate to. And that's what we want for women, is to find helpful ways to unpack and, name more accurately for themselves what is happening. So the coercion for sure is a helpful idea. But as we think about the cycle, the coercion is everywhere in it, right? But also so are the threats, and so are the financial controls. And sometimes, as Karen said in the explosion, there can be he can be screaming and raging for 3 hours, or he can just go down to the basement for 3 days. And so it's all centered around his control over the relationship. Absolutely. So we love the language of control. But a couple things. One is we're seeing that men are also using that against women. So they're weaponizing it because there's no gender analysis to it. And that's problematic. But it also doesn't reflect the whole range of tactics that men use. So it's one aspect of abuse, but it's not the whole of it. And what I've noticed in the literature is that people talking about coercive control are really just drawing from the definitions and scope of what we mean by woman abuse. So to me, it's a little bit nudging us towards a dominant discourse that's kind of more palatable, less pointing to who's doing what to who's hurting whom. And that neutrality, I think, is always dangerous.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for some women who there was a lot of physical violence, or there was a lot of screaming or yelling or name calling, like for them that word doesn't capture all of it. So we're consciously using the language of abuse, knowing that we're talking about all types of abuse, verbal attacks, physical attacks, financial sabotage, and those coercive behaviors that are part of it. They all come under the umbrella of abuse as we think of it.
Yeah.
And when we think about, spiritual, like either preventing women from having access to their faith or ridiculing their faith, and it may be coercive sex, but it also might be rape.
Yeah.
It's not at all coercive. It is just sexual assault of a woman. It might be withholding. That's also not coercion so much as so to me, it's a helpful notion, but it doesn't encompass all of women's experiences adequately.
Yeah. I think at the end of the day, the woman abuse really just highlights and explicitly names who is being abused and who's doing the abusing. And that's the language we're going to use for we have used, When Love Hurts uses, and that's how we'll continue to use that language moving forward with the podcast.
As feminism emerged, it was difficult for people to move from the idea of calling women ladies to women. And, because ladies has it was very controversial because, ladies has a very prescribed identity and behavior around it. And just saying the word woman was hard for people.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so I think it's the same, woman abuse, we know there's lots of negative stereotypes attached to it. And, you know, what we're talking about in the dominant discourse makes women avoid saying and being comfortable using that language. But for us, it's part of how we move forward. You know, you asked earlier, how do we get past all of this? It's like, well, first we have to talk about it honestly and accurately.
Actually, you've reminded me of something, Joe. I remember recently thinking about how the word sexism, it just really obfuscates what's going on.
Right.
And how, shouldn't it be womanism?
Right.
You know, it's the same thing.
Yeah. Misogyny is really such a more accurate idea than sexism.
Yes.
We've talked a little bit about this pattern, or a little bit. We've talked a lot about this pattern. But I want to go back to the dominant discourses we've talked about in the first episode, because these, again, are so interconnected into everything that we are doing. And so some of the dominant discourses that we've kind of drawn out as we talk about the cycle of abuse, one that I think we've highlighted is, why does she stay?
And the cycle answers that in part, right? That it's so confusing, and that hopeful piece keeps coming around the honeymoon. The guy she chose keeps coming around. And another important thing to remember is that because that's who she met in the beginning, that's who she thinks he really is, right? And this tension and explosion is because he's stressed out or whatever. So the cycle explains why she might stay as long as she stays. I mean, there also starts to be other things that trap her, like children in common, no place to go, etc. But the cycle is definitely part of what traps her. And it appears to trap other people too, right? Because the helping professionals also buy the honeymoon and get sucked in and then end up not being helpful in the way that they might be.
And, you know, that question really does reflect the dominant discourse, because what we point to with the cycle is that it continues after she's left. And so the staying and leaving is not relevant to the pattern, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So often people think, oh, there's a simple solution. She just leaves. Well, that doesn't stop the abuse, because he's 100% responsible for the abuse, and he's going to continue the cycle. And we know, having supported lots of women, that often things get worse when she leaves, right? He starts legal stuff. He ramps up the social isolation. He tells a lot of lies about her, whatever it is. And women either know that, or they have a sense of that like, it's going to probably get worse before it might start to get better. And leaving women with some hope long term. Typically gets better, right? A very simplistic solution that, oh, well, we can just solve this by her leaving doesn't get what the cycle and how it works, and that it's his and he's going to continue it.
When you think about, like, he's uttered threats, I will kill you and the children, or your mother, or all family members if you leave. Like, imagine how that idea fits for women, or sits with women, that that everybody keeps telling her she just should leave. And she knows that the threat is to be believed because she's seen enough of him and others haven't. And so, Karen, you said it last time, and it's worth saying again, if anybody's offering a simple solution to this, they haven't listened carefully enough to women's stories.
Well, the abusive men are out of control, and he's got anger issues. That is one that constantly comes up. And we see all kinds of anger groups and anger management, anger management, everything. So,
well, we see with the cycle, we see that he's using his anger, probably in the tension and in the explosion, to silence her, to pull her back into line, to scare her, to terrify her. So he doesn't have an anger problem. He really knows how to use anger to his advantage, right? And the cycle helps us see that, because other people aren't seeing that anger, and he's not showing that when he's choosing to do the honeymoon on her.
He's very much in control. Not out of control.
And he's in control. Like, he's the one who pushes to each of the phases, right? So when, again, we've talked about this, but when he senses she might leave, it's like, okay, this is the time to send roses to work, where there's a public honeymoon, right? Where all the staff are like, oh, he must really love you. What a great catch. And so he knows, even in that little act, he's honeymooning everybody in that moment, and he's in control of that. And And the tension, women are very aware of it as soon as it starts, right? It's like, oh, that tone of voice, that the way he closed the door, the way he talked to the dog, or, you know, that he said he was going to do something and now I'm afraid to ask him because I can hear in his voice that that's going to escalate. And it's a way that he teaches her that she's responsible for the escalation as well. It's like, well, again, if you hadn't talked to me like that, if you had just come home when you said you were going to, or if you hadn't worn that outfit, I wouldn't have escalated. But he's absolutely in control of all.
Yeah. And she's doing so many things to try to keep things over at the honeymoon, right? She's trying everything. She's trying to be very accommodating. Okay, I won't rock the boat. I'll be very agreeable. Oh, maybe I need to like put up a boundary, right? Like she's just trying everything to try to keep in the honeymoon, but he's going to keep driving it around. Yeah. And I remember for myself, I think when this really clicked for myself is I thought, he is exploding because of how I shut the door. Yeah. And it was like this kind of light bulb moment for me of like, this really is not about me. Yeah. They do a very good job of convincing you that it is about you. And if you just did things differently, then he wouldn't explode.
Yeah. It's just, as we're talking about the anger and just what you said, Karen, that thing that Lundy Bancroft says about it's not that he has anger issues. He doesn't have a problem with his anger. He has a problem with your anger.
Right.
When you shut the door wrong.
Yeah.
And to be clear, I just shut the door.
That's right.
You're definitely pointing to something important, that if women do express some anger or frustration or
displeasure at what's going on,
or even like clarity, like this is not okay, then he's very likely to go to the explosion, right?
Yeah. Like again, if we put abuse or the power and control at the center of that, then it all makes sense. It's like, because my taking a stand is a threat to his power and control. Yes, exactly. And so he always has to be on top. And often that's by way of driving the woman lower is his way of being more powerful.
I think as we wrap up, like a nice way to think about this is an analogy that Joe and I came up with together. And we think highlights a little bit of this experience of when you're experiencing abuse. It's like you are going down a whitewater rapid river. And at first, when you're first going down, you're going down floating, probably not floating, but drowning, feeling like you're drowning and gasping for air. And you don't know when it's going to stop, and you think you're going to die, or you're afraid. And there's so much, it's so scary.
Yes.
And learning about the cycle of abuse can be like someone throwing you a life vest.
Nice.
And really, you're still going down the river. There's still a lot of threat and fear, but at least you've learned something a little bit to give you, it empowers enough to help you to start to see what it is that you are experiencing.
And I think it can really help with the self-doubt, right? Like the I'm responsible, I'm part of this. You know, sometimes we suggest to women, take half a step back emotionally, and to whatever extent is safe, because women have to put their safety first, but try to like just watch the cycle and see like he's doing this no matter what you're doing, right? And it really helps with women. It lifts off a layer of responsibility, and I'm to blame, or I have my part in this, or I can do, you know, I should be able to change this.
Yes.
You know, Alison, that description really, I think we just want to really honor how terrifying this is for women. And thinking about being on a wild river without any life jacket or any, I think it's such an accurate reminder about how terrifying it is for women. So, you know, we've talked about it in a kind of tidy way, but underneath all of that is this sheer terror for women. And that anything we can offer women that's truthful and accurate and centers them and their experience can be part of the life support.
So if you do want more information, go to our website, whenlovehurts.ca. And as always, please like, share, and subscribe so more people can access this content and this information. Again, this season was supported by the generosity of MCC Canada. And if you'd like to listen to more of this information and you want this podcast to continue, we are looking for a sponsor for next season. So if you are interested, please contact us through our website at whenlovehurts.ca.